industry of pushing. No, they went to these leaders and warned them and said, no, you can't stop.
Who did?
It was from the US.
The US?
Yes.
So they told leaders you cannot buy this used clothes anymore.
You cannot stop buying from us used clothes or importing them into
Which organization in the US was it?
Maybe you'll come to understand it when I go to the last point.
Okay.
This is the journey to one Africa.
30 years ago, Rwanda had a genocide where 20% of the population was killed. 1 million people died in 100 days. Teachers butchered students, husbands killed their wives, wives killed their mothers. It was one of the worst events in human history. Somehow today, Rwanda is one of the most advanced economies and safest countries in Africa, a beacon for hope for the rest of the continent. I sat down with President Kagame, the man that led a country reeling from the worst atrocities in our lifetime to becoming one of the most advanced economies in Africa, one of the safest countries in Africa. He was involved in saving the country from genocide, leading the militia that overthrew the genocidal government, and then rebuilt the country from scratch, even below scratch, to where it is today. And now he's in the middle of a political turmoil where he's being accused of being involved in the war in Congo, one of the worst wars going on right now. I hope you enjoyed this interview. It will probably be one of the most memorable stories you've ever heard. What you're saying is that aid could become a liability for a country.
That is even an understatement. It is. Whoever gives you aid controls your life.
Rwanda has a history in Congo. Congo, I feel, is like, it's not even a country anymore. As heartbreaking it is, it's just a land full of minerals that so many different people have their hands into that pot.
If you looked at the list of 100 entities who are interested in minerals in the Congo, Rwanda would come as 100th. Our problem is not minerals. Ours is about security. We really want peace. We want peace in Congo because it translates into peace for us.
If you're sitting privately with President Felix right now, what would you tell him?
I would tell him I wish he wasn't president of that good country.
You came into Rwanda, the RPF came in, you took over the government, and you took over leadership after about 100 days, 3 months or so. And then you had a country, as you said earlier, that was just death. There was nothing there, just dead bodies and dogs eating those bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone that was alive was either a participant in the massacre or someone that was lucky enough to escape. How? What would you do as someone that is in charge of such a country? What was the first thing you did to rebuild the country?
Yeah, we got to find where to start from, and one of them was reorganize the forces that that had been fighting, and map out what next do we do. We at least the war is won with a huge loss. That's another issue. And then the other is what remains of people. By the way, this was accompanied in 94 at the beginning. We had nearly 3 million people who went into Eastern Congo. 3 million. And others about 600 to 800,000 into Tanzania.
Wow.
Yeah. So the whole country was emptied. Yes, and that was part of the strategy for them. It was like, if we are defeated, and then we shall empty the country so that these people, because they used to call us foreigners, that these foreigners who came in from outside, from Uganda, from Burundi, from wherever, by the time they come, they should find the country empty, meaning making it ungovernable, or even to fail to start from anywhere. So, but we did two things. We reorganized our own people and were in no way hiding the fact that this was almost an impossible task to rebuild the country that starts from below the scratch and empty of people, because the refugees had, others were displaced internally. 3 million went to Eastern Congo, about 700, 800 went to Tanzania, others hundreds to Uganda, others hundreds of thousands to both Uganda and Burundi. So we had others internally displaced in their thousands. So we had now to create a sense of security to allow people and start encouraging people not only to come back from outside, but also for those internally displaced to go back to their places and assure them nothing is going to happen to them, which we succeeded in doing. Now, this is where it becomes even very interesting. For the millions of those who were in Eastern Congo, they were held captive by the army that fled with them, and they had all kinds of arms. They had tanks, they had artillery, and they were all positioned in the camps.
They had, so when they fled the AFDR, when they fled to Congo, they fled not only with like machine guns and machetes.
No,
they had
huge
tanks.
arms. Yeah.
And from what I know as well, the French troops, I think it's UN peacekeeping troops, they gave them a safe passage into Congo.
They did.
Right after the genocide.
From 2 points, one southwest, Rusizi area, and then from northwest to...
Because they expected, I'm assuming they expected the RPF, your group, to commit reprisal attacks and kill them.
Not only that, they might have expected that, but more so, they had wanted to find time to reorganize and attack the country again, to take over the country.
That was their plan?
That was their plan. That's how they went with arms. They went with everything, by the way. The treasury was empty, the central bank, all the money taken, everything. They were living in a place called Mugunga in Eastern Congo, where even now there are refugees. But the point I'm bringing up is interesting, that is interesting for me, is we kept urging them to come back and reassured them that nothing would happen to them. But those leaders, both in the army and in politics, were refusing them to come back, the millions. So what we did, and we warned them. We warned them that if they don't come back, two things. We will repatriate them forcefully, because we don't even want the defeated army and the militias to hold them hostage and later on use them to come back. And we did that surgically. We did it actually with the minimal. So we kept urging them. And when we went and surrounded these camps and told people, ordinary people, to move out and leave these armed groups there.
You did that, what, through radio broadcasts?
We were doing through radio broadcasts. We were using UN as well, and we were sending people who had relatives among them to go and talk to them. They went.
So the UN was telling people that?
Yeah.
Okay.
We prepared that. So we actually now forced them back.
Okay.
And they came. Now the story here I'm driving at. Now the whole world, there was minimal loss of life in what we did, but we stood accused of having forcefully repatriated people. And the world was blaming us. For quite some days, they were all flowing, just like a river, more or less.
In the 90s?
Flowing, yeah, that was the 90s.
Okay.
And they were being accused. Now, the point I'm making here is the aid, the humanitarian industry had taken hold of things. So these camps should remain like that forever.
So the aid agencies they're meant to help people build their own life and move on from the camp. The camp is meant to be temporary.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying that aid agencies had an incentive to keep that camp as is in
Forever.
perpetuity.
It becomes an industry on its own. By the way, that is what the accusation is in Eastern Congo currently. But there have been camps there even before Goma fell or before the war, because of the chaos that has been going on in Eastern Congo. Now that these people took over FCM23, and people have actually started going back home, who now entirely, the whole group has gone home, the aid agencies are accusing M23 and AFC of causing a humanitarian disaster, because there are no longer many camps to look after. So that becomes a humanitarian disaster.
So what they're calling is a humanitarian disaster is people moving on from the camps and going home.
Yes.
But what's their incentive? So there must be a financial incentive then for them to run the camps? Because there's no other... Why else would...
Of course there are.
So saying
There is money flowing into these organizations for humanitarian activities or to run these camps. If you don't have these camps of people displaced, where even if you got the money, you say, unless you go to their homes and help them from there, which would be a noble thing. But that's not what they do. They complain that they have left camps and they are not able to feed them with all kinds of things. So that becomes a political issue. As it is now it is. But it is now, and it was then, 30 years ago, the same thing, the same complaint.
So instead of teaching people how to fish, their incentive is just to keep giving people fish, and that's how they...
You'll never see it anywhere.
And so essentially, because Rwanda is a country that dependent on foreign aid for a long time. I think you're one of the biggest beneficiaries. 90% of GDP in the old days was from aid. I think now it's about, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Now it's down to like 10, 15%. You guys have done really well at not depending on aid. So what you're saying is that aid is, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but aid could become a liability for a country based on what you're saying.
That is even an understatement. It is. In the long run, it is. Depends on how it is managed. And that has been a position from the beginning. We have told the people we appreciate aid. We needed it and we still need it to an extent. But we need it so that we build capacities, not to need it in the near future. That is a standard for us. That's what we say, and that's what we do.
So, again, a common friend of ours told me a story about how you were talking with other leaders about this aid. And there was instances where you're like, and I'd rather you tell the story than I, but you're like, I don't need that aid. And they're almost like they're trying to force it on you in a way.
Yeah.
Can you give me such examples?
It has been discussion. These discussions have dominated many years, and many conversations we have had between those who need support, aid support, those who And the question for us has always been, we need it. We can put a date to it. We can show where we need it, but we also work out how to get out of it. And this is something we have with us. We share with anyone who wants to do work relating to aid with us. But that has attracted a lot of problems for us. Some of us even thinking, we have been branded either arrogant or insensitive or dictatorial or all kinds of names, just because of that.
Because you don't want aid.
Because we say, and we try to differentiate things. It's not that we don't want aid for the sake of not wanting it. We are saying aid creates dependency. But not only dependency is on the good side, the better side even. The other one is, whoever gives you aid controls your life. In fact, that's why they want you to stay with the aid, so they continue controlling your life. And even threaten, use it as a tool to direct you where they want you to go. They keep threatening you, if you don't do this, we will switch off.
It's politically weaponizing aid.
It is weaponized, absolutely. Quote me on that.
And so how does that work? How can you tell an aid organization or someone, I don't want aid, and they're like, no, you have to take it? Can you give me an example of such an interaction?
Well, let me tell you as an interaction. In 1998 or 9, no, I think 8, we used to get a lot of aid because of the situation we were in, 98.
That's 4 years after the genocide.
Yes. And many European developed countries' ministers used to come visit, see the needs and so on and so forth. One time I had a conversation with a number of them. In fact, one, starting with one, I remember a lady, she was called Claire Short. She was UK, International Development Minister of UK. We had a long conversation, and I told her, I said, you know what, it's still too early for us to say much, but I think, and I told her, I think it's not too early for that effort. I said, I appreciate your aid a lot. It's almost indispensable in that situation as we're in. I said, but at the same time, I want to start early to be responsible. And I keep talking to our ministers and other leaders that we need to start early being responsible for ourselves. And these, again, were lessons learned from our past, what we went through. And I said, I want you to think about giving us aid, but on the basis that you and us agree on where to put this money you give us. You don't walk in with the bags of money and say, for me, I'm putting it there. You say, this is our country. We want you to come with these bags of money, and you find us here, and we have a conversation about what meets your interests, where do you want your money to go with us? But you must consider where we want the money to go also. Because in the end, we are the ones responsible.
What did she say?
She agreed.
Okay, that's good.
Fortunately, she agreed.
That's a good interaction.
At first, she was like, who is this one now?
Was there interactions?
But later on, we agreed.
Was there interactions that were not as positive?
Yeah, let me show you. So we reached an agreement with her eventually. But interestingly, she invited other ministers of countries, I think, that were friendly to UK or friendly to them. They came with there were three, two other ministers on top of her from different countries. And she wanted me to tell them what I had told her, because she wanted them to listen to what I was saying. And we did. And for some of those two, they started, you would say, no, but our people will not accept this. You know, I said, okay, why should your people have a problem? On top of that, I had suggested to her that not only will you give us money, determine where to go, where to put this money by you and us, but we want you to follow up and make sure that we used your money correctly where we agreed. So we should have an audit, maybe after every 3 years.
You've asked them for an audit?
We were asking, yes, we said we should have audit. They would audit all of us. They would audit you if you really gave us the money you promised you would give us.
Mm.
And if we used the money the way we agreed we were going to use it, and this money was not lost in the hands of people who stole it or something. And, you know, it worked. Later on, these two were also convinced. So with the three countries, they gave us the money, was followed up, audits were made, and they found we were just putting the money they gave us where we had agreed with.
So it went how it should go.
That's how it should. I mean, there's no question about it.
What about USAID, for example? How is the experience with them?
I'm not deeply. I don't have much knowledge about them and so on, but I'll tell you on the surface of it, at least what I experienced. Both when I was still a kid, living in a refugee camp, and I remember we used to see a lot of things coming to us. Sometimes it would be fish, then another time cooking oil, then labeled USAID. And yeah, so I fed off USAID, if you will.
So you're dependent on them.
Yes,
you and your family dependent on USAID as a kid.
I definitely did as a kid. Yeah, but that is telling part of the story. This is because I was in a refugee camp. In fact, the first thing is to even resolve the problem so that there are no refugees. Okay? The second is you keep feeding people, like in other cases, until when? Does it become something that stays forever with the people? And if people just remain grateful that they're being fed and that's it? So there are two parts to that area story, as I said. They were not the ones who made us refugees. That's not something to blame them on.
But they didn't care about getting you to become independent and move on from being a refugee.
Yes, because and since USAID is also connected with the government, say, of the United States, they should, at the same time, using their leverage, whatever they have, to address the problems of people who are displaced or who are refugees, so that those other issues are also addressed. And picking it from here, from USAID, for me when I was a kid, and the other story I told you of humanitarian assistance needed by camps in Eastern Congo, I always see, so this is, let's say in Eastern Congo, you have camps. You would stay there for maybe 4 or 5 years. And it's supposed to be so forever. A situation like this one happens, however it happened, people are now removed from camps. They go back homes, whichever home, if they had homes, whichever places. And then there is a complaint that, this is a bigger disaster. That people have gone home is
Instead
a bigger
of being called
disaster.
a success, it's being called a disaster.
Yes, so there's therefore that mentality, there's that of dependency that, and it works across politics. It's not just one part. I'll give another example. We discussed with the leaders in East African community, that is Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Burundi, South Sudan, ourselves, and so on. We have a community with it. I remember I was that time East African community chair. We talked about, we could see a lot of flows of used clothes, second-hand clothes, tons and tons, more in Kenya, more in Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, wherever they were. So I raised an issue in the meeting. I said, and I told some of the countries I know in this community, I said, I know you grow cotton. A lot of cotton is grown in your country, in this country. When are we going to build our textile industries? If we have cotton, but we export it raw, the way it is in its raw form without adding any value to it, and then we import tons and tons and tons of used clothes. So we agreed, and everybody seemed they knew, but they were just reminded. And they said, that's the point. So we agreed we are going to actually make it very costly for people to keep pushing used clothes here, so that in the end we develop our textile industries. After a few weeks, in fact, for us, we were not even... So the industry of pushing, they went to these leaders and warned them and said, no, you can't stop.
Who did?
It was from the US.
The US?
Yes.
So they told leaders, you cannot buy this used clothes anymore.
You cannot stop buying from us used clothes or importing them into
Which organization in the US was it?
Maybe you'll come to understand it when I go to the last point.
Okay.
So they say, you must, there's no way you can do without this. So some of the leaders, we had made a decision together, but under pressure differently, leaders gave up that decision to not, and we were also approached, and they were told, you are making a mistake, you can't refuse taking in, otherwise you will be affected. They even warned us that if we insist, we are going to be struck off the beneficiaries of AGOA, African Growth Opportunity Act.
So other aid was going to be crossed off because you don't want this.
Yeah,
you didn't want this used clothes that was hurting your textile industry, that was preventing you from building a textile industry. Like, I don't want this. This helps us. This one helps us, but I don't want this one because it doesn't help us. They're like, nope. Either you take this one as well, or we'll stop the good one.
That's exactly what happened. Now, for us, before we realized, all the countries who had agreed to take that decision had already given up, and they were already importing used clothes so that they continue benefiting from United States. In the end, we were left alone. We didn't even know. And that time led us to being struck off the AGOA list. The others remained because they accepted. For us, we were struck off the list of AGOA beneficiaries because of this argument.
But who makes those decisions? Is it like some junior people in those organizations that are like, no, we need to keep that up?
I don't know. But we tried to argue back. We sent back messages. We were telling whoever we could reach and say, but this is not fair. Blah, blah, blah. They just ignored us.
Did you talk to anyone? But could you bring it up with someone more higher level up politicians?
Yeah. The ones who are in charge of African desk in State Department and yeah.
That's crazy.
So that tells you a bit of the story. Yes, that's about aid. It's about
dependence.
Yes.
So you had to rebuild the country from scratch, and one thing that everyone talked about that you focused on was dignity, which for me it's so confusing that I had to literally search the definition of dignity because it's not something a term that I would use. Why did the concept of dignity become so important for Rwanda after the genocide, and how would you define dignity?
Yeah. For example, when I told you that we asked these aid donors to really give us a chance so that as we benefit from their aid, we're also building our own capacity so that we don't perpetually depend on them. That's about dignity.
That's exactly what aid organizations should want you to do.
Yeah. And it's about you putting yourself in a certain position that you really don't want to be dependent forever. It's about dignity. When we are telling people, don't push to us second-hand clothes endlessly. Let's have a time we can stop this, but also at the same time we develop our textile industries. It's about, you can't think like that and act like that unless you are mindful of what is your place in this world. It's about dignity.
You even went as far as making begging illegal. Is that true? Or that's false?
Begging
for money. Was that it made illegal at any stage?
In a way that I think that must have come from that because.
So it was true. It was made illegal.
It was true.
Okay.
It is true.
You made that decision.
And in fact, what we did, we put two processes in place.
It's fascinating. Rule of law.
Yes, we did two things. One is for those who are capable, we gave them a chance to be trained to do something so that they can live on their earnings rather than those who are not capable, either handicapped in one form or another. We have a mechanism in the government of looking after them from government coffers.
So you built it into a system where it no longer wasn't degrading as begging. It was no longer the dependence that existed during colonial times. You focus really on just changing everyone's mentality to no longer depend on others.
That's exactly what it is. Because you could find some people on the streets begging, young men and women who are like 15, 16, 17.
When they could go and work.
When they could go, even started to do something. And in fact, we put a technical school which can take in up to close to 1,000 people in the western part of our country to teach people mechanics or, to be a mechanic, motor vehicle mechanic or whatever, that category of things. And these young people were sent there and they learned to do things. I was told, for example, the first batch that came out of that training, which went on for about 6 months, and then later on it was increased to a year. The first batch of 6 months, when they got out of that place, 70% found employment.
Wow.
70%.
Your model's becoming, like the more I learned about what you did to Rwanda, especially after after 1994, You literally turned a country that was probably the most failed a country's ever been in Africa. It's just a complete genocide. To becoming the pinnacle of what Africa could become. And the model that you've built is something that other countries could emulate. And I know you've created an organization to teach other countries to do a lot of the similar things you're doing. Why aren't we seeing that in other countries, though? Or are we in Africa? Why is Africa still, as Christian said in one of our calls, it's always referred to as the country of tomorrow, because that tomorrow never comes? What are other countries lacking? What's stopping them from doing what you're doing?
I can really speak for myself. For others, what I see, if they wanted to do things similar or like to ours, they can maybe succeed even more or better. But a decision has to be made by leaders, and it's about politics. It's about politics. You can, and people are the same everywhere. If you brought them an opportunity in any part of Africa, Africa is still lagging behind other continents, but what has made other people rich are the same things that they would make Africa rich. Because Africa is endowed with resources. I mean, take a country like DRC, by the way.
Congo, it's a good time to pivot, because DRC is an incredibly rich country.
Very, very rich. But there are other countries which
minerals.
Okay. Why would a country like that ever have to beg for anything from anyone? Why?
I should be asking you, it's your neighbor.
Yeah, but I'm just using the question to answer you, to show that it's about politics, it's about management, it's about, by the way, that integrity that we're talking about. You know, to these leaders feel they should be working with their people and to make sure that they benefit from these resources and raise everybody to a much higher level. Once you don't think about it like that, then it doesn't happen. Because in every country of the continent, I'm sure in the United States you see many Senegalese, many Rwandans, many Congolese, many, and they are as brainy, as endowed, as, you know, they have the capacities like those people in the United States or like in Europe and so on.
Then why aren't they prospering in Congo? What is, like, Congo is a perfect example of this happening today.
The politics of our continent.
It's just the system is so flawed.
It is just, yeah.
The way I see it, so you have a history with Congo. Yeah. Obviously, a lot of Rwandan citizens migrated to Congo, escaped to Congo prior to 1994. A lot of Tutsis are there. Now, I don't want to use those terms now, but they're still being used in Congo. A lot of Tutsis prior to the genocide. After the genocide, a lot of Hutus as well. So there's a lot of Rwandan citizens in Congo.
But are those, that, by the way, there are those bona fide citizens. Part of that Congo was carved out and left into Congo during colonial times, during the Berlin Conference, when borders were being drawn.
So the Eastern Congo?
Yes.
Eastern Congo was a separate country, or what before that?
No. I'm saying, you know, when borders were being drawn,
yeah,
like the border between us and times. Uganda, during colonial times, that is in the 1890s. Yes. So they drew a line. It was just an open place. They drew a line, left Rwanda on this side, what was later to be called Rwanda on one side, and the other side it was called Congo. But this line divided the families. Some of them Rwandan, even related, were left on one side and others on the other side.
It's crazy.
We have a similar situation with Uganda, by the way.
Uganda and Rwanda.
Yeah, Rwanda, yeah. Southwestern part of Uganda a place with about 1 million people, they are typically Rwandan. But by that divide, during colonial times, these people were left there as Ugandans, and others were left here as Rwandese.
So just Africans split with lines.
It is everywhere across the continent, in actual fact.
That's crazy.
So the issue now is, you can talk about others who migrated and went to Congo from Rwanda, or
vice versa,
whatever it is, before that, whatever it is. But there are those who are indigenous to that place.
Yeah.
And in fact, these are the ones who are fighting, whom the government is uprooting and saying, you go back to Rwanda.
You're talking about the M23 now?
Yeah. And we have, by the 130,000 people, refugees from that group, 130,000.
From Congo in Rwanda?
Yeah. They've been living here for the last 23 years.
And Congo doesn't want them back?
It doesn't even want those who are there, who never came here.
Are they the ones labeled as Tutsi, or they're different?
Yes.
The Tutsis.
Exactly.
So that's where the Tutsi minority is also being targeted in Congo, as it was in
Rwanda.
And that's a big concern that you have.
That's the point.
Because you have, again, going back to the history with Congo, because after you became the leader of Rwanda, in 1996, there was a leader called Kabila in Rwanda. He was very corrupt, supported by the US during Soviet Cold War era. Then the US withdrew its support.
That was Mobutu.
Sorry, Mobutu was the one. Sorry, Mobutu. Yes. And then Kabila is the one that you supported.
Yes.
Francis Kabila. That took over power. And then Francis Kabila and you guys, your relationship broke down for whatever reason, without going into the weeds. And then there was multiple wars where Rwanda was involved. And then he was shot by his bodyguard. His son, Joseph Kabila, took over. Then there was an election, and we have today's leader, Felix. We call him Felix because his last name is too difficult to pronounce.
Yeah.
So Rwanda has a history in Congo. Now, this is where I try to break it down, and I see we've kind of framed the entire history, so to give at least listeners a bit more understanding of the story. But it's also very complicated in Congo. Congo, I feel, is like, it's not even a country anymore. It's just, as heartbreaking it is, it's just a land full of minerals that so many different people have their hands into that pot. Countries,
those who gain more are from outside.
Exactly. That's how I see Congo.
Yeah.
And it's on your border. So you're all over the media now, and every single journalist that interviews is like, are you in Congo? Is Rwanda involved in Congo? Are you supporting M23? Without really understanding the context. So I'll tell you my understanding of it, and I'd love you to correct me and give me more context. So you have a threat on your border. That threat still houses the FDLR, the same people that committed the genocide 30 years ago. They're still there on your border. Their goal is to still replace you as president, replace the entire government right now, and to still get rid of Tutsis in Rwanda. So that's still their objective. And they're doing the same thing for Tutsis in Congo. So the argument that Rwanda has concerns, security concerns, and you're still getting attacked by those groups on a regular basis, is a very valid concern that no one's talking about for whatever reason. Then there's the other argument of minerals. So the way I see it is, there's all these different hands, some corrupt, some good, some bad, that are, some of them committing horrendous crimes to get access to the minerals in Congo, because it's such a wealthy country. And there's no real way of doing business with Congo. So the way I see it is, there is a financial incentive for the Rwandan military or the government to be involved in Congo as well. And your preference is to do it above board. You want to do a deal with Congo, whoever's in charge, and get rid of that security threat, but also be able to do business because, you're landlocked, you have people to take care of, 13 million population. You have minerals in Rwanda, just not even close as much as Congo. So the conclusion that I came to with my limited knowledge is, you don't think the current government is doing the best job. You think that they operate in a country that everyone wants it to be unstable, because that's how they get access to the minerals. You think the leader of the Mr. Nanga, who's the leader of the AFD, which is the M23's part of, he's also technically the leader of M23. he could become a better leader than the current president. My conclusion is that the Rwandan forces are involved with M23. Potentially, you last time you asked, you said you don't know if there's troops there. I come to the conclusion that there is troops there for security concerns and potentially to be able to do business. That's the only way. And your end goal is for Congo to be stable, a country that's 10 times bigger than you, for Congo to be stable, even more prosperous than you if that's possible, and to do business with Congo a peaceful way. Mm-hmm. But you're not able to reach a path to that. So that's my conclusion. I might have gotten many things wrong. I'd love to get your thoughts on everything.
I think you've kind of summarized things quite well. But let me also try to say this. If you looked at the list of 100 entities, 100 from wherever, China, Europe, US, Canada, and so on, including all of us in the region, who are interested in minerals in the Congo, Rwanda would come as 100th. We would come at the bottom. If you ranked them 1, 2, 3, this. But the situation is such that it has been made to look like the ones least concerned with the minerals have been the ones accused for the entire problem of these 100 who get billions and billions and leave nothing behind. So Rwanda has come to be the ones to absorb it. So that is...
to absorb all the blame.
All the blame. Because those that whole line up to the 99s are the people who have the power of the media, of everything. And for them, they're also benefiting from the bad politics of Congo. And most of these people probably have a share in the companies formed together with Tshisekedi.
President Felix.
Yes.
Okay.
So that is one. Mm. So our problem is not minerals. It has nothing to do with minerals. Ours is about security. And once we are not assured of our security and long term, we can't be thinking about minerals in that situation. No, that would be the last thing on our minds. Mm. Now, the second problem that combines with that, because of that history we said of the people of the Congolese of Rwandese origin, but carved out by the border, and the governments in Kinshasa all the time use this pretext and say, first of all, they say they want to get rid of these people. And this came with this FDLR, those who committed genocide, went to Congo 30 years ago. They work with politics and politicians in DRC. They go against these, they single out the Tutsis in Eastern Congo. And they cause them problems, but they want to cause them problems and eventually cause problems to Rwanda. Now, these are things we have discussed with everyone, whichever government that has come into Congo since after Mobutu.
So that includes Kabila, the one that you've helped get into power, and his son.
And even Tshisekedi and Felix.
What does Felix say? Like, I know publicly he calls you Hitler and he says all these crazy things.
I think he has a genocide ideology like
Do you think so? He's that extreme?
I think so. He is.
Have you spoken to him privately?
I have spoken to him like 100 times before these problems.
Was there any common ground? Was there any
Yeah, we discussed even when he became president. By the way, I don't mind how he became president. He was not elected both times. The first time he was handed over power by
Joseph.
Yes, there's no question about it. The second, he just declared himself, and that was it, and told everybody to shut up, and that's what happened.
Okay.
So, but that's not my problem. It is a problem
I think Africa has bigger problems than getting to democracy.
But when you look at it, let's go back to UN a bit again. The UN has been there now for about 24 years, has been in Congo. UN. Even currently it is there. They have had about 17 to 18,000 peacekeepers, so-called, in that place from different countries. Well, some from Latin America, others from North Africa, others from Asia, they are all over. They have spent, if you calculate the amount of money spent on that mission over that year, over that period of 24 years, is close to 40 billion. Now, the question number one is, what did they actually come to do? To keep peace? Which peace is there? To bring peace? Which peace have they brought? To solve the problem concerning Rwanda of security of these FDLR that have lived there for the last 30 years? Nothing.
So why are they there?
The only thing they did relating to this, they have over time repatriated some FDLR and their families.
Back to Rwanda?
Back to Rwanda. It's on record. It's recorded. The rest, I don't know.
So why are they there, in your opinion?
This is the whole thing. This is the crookedness of the whole international system we are talking about.
So you
I
think
can't answer.
So essentially, there's so many, as you said earlier, there's so many hands in the pot when it comes to Congolese minerals that they.
So many.
So the only, and they're non-governmental hands, yes, or governmental as well, both. Some smaller governments, but
it's
a lot
both.
of private companies. Yeah,
it's both. It's very much governmental, even those governments from outside. So they create something, UN peacekeeping force, humanitarian this, and then to cover up everything else that is being. So because when you ask, you say, yeah, we are helping the people in the camps. You know, when they do this, you say, no, but you see, we put some FDLR on the trucks and carry them to Rwanda. This is what has cost 40 billion. Yes,
and on top of that, tens of thousands of lives as well.
Yes.
What the story.
But if you ask them, we say, what security did you bring to Rwanda concerning them relating to FDLR? There's nothing. That's why they are still there. That's why they were being brought into the country, those who were captured during this fighting just 2-3 days ago.
Yeah, I heard that the last few days there's a general that was part of the.
That is the one I told you who killed my own aunt.
Which I didn't know she was also royalty.
Yeah, she was. She's a cousin sister to my mother.
Okay, so based on what you've said so far, you know, I try to always kind of put myself in your shoes. Obviously, it's a lot harder than it sounds. But your solution would be to support a group that could either create a security buffer zone on the border.
Let me tell you this. We have been demanding for years, and we'll keep doing so until we get it. Our borders, this time and particularly with DRC, must be secure from these people. And the world knows about and has ignored. There's no question about it.
So they've essentially left you no choice.
That's what it means. And we have, but by the way, let me say something else. This fighting that started 3 years ago did not start with Rwanda. Those guys who started the fighting did not come from Rwanda.
You're talking about M23.
M23. Yeah. Their problem was there in 2012. So the problem came back 10 years after. It means in between, nobody addressed their problem, neither Kinshasa nor anybody else. And they are the ones who started the fighting. The way it is brought, the way Rwanda is brought into it, is by saying, these are Tutsis. It's like you wanted to finish them one way or the other, either by sending the entire group to Rwanda to live there and leave us alone, leave Congo, or kill them and finish them. So that didn't happen. So making it difficult to get rid of them into Rwanda or to kill them entirely, Rwanda is the one that made it impossible. So we should be blamed for that. Yeah.
One question I asked as I did my homework is, I'm like, why would the president, from the outside, and I think you'd agree, is that it looks very evident that Rwanda's supporting M23. And I'm saying this myself, so you're not saying it.
I wouldn't even run away from. It depends on what you see. Why sometimes we have been vague and so on. I'll tell you this.
I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love you to tell me. And I think I know why as well.
You see, if they keep saying, "Are you in Congo?" and I say yes, that becomes
they blame you for everything.
The only problem, and that is the end.
Exactly. That's what I learned.
So this one, so it even has legal implications. They see, he even said it. And the other problems, why Rwanda could have gone there or why they could have done this, all those problems are forgotten. The only problem is, why are you in Congo?
And they blame everything that's happening in Congo. It's been happening for decades with all these different groups fighting, all these different countries with their hands in Congo. Everything's gone because Rwanda said that small country with 13 million people said they have troops, or they have not troops, sorry, they're supporting M23.
All the minerals that have been worth billions and billions, they say, you see, the whole money was taken by Rwanda. For us, we are...
Yeah. That's what I learned. I was really confused on
it. No, that's the reason.
Because you're a very direct person, so you're always very honest, very open, very direct. Your team.
I tried even on that to be direct, because I said Rwanda has taken defensive measures. It's up to anybody to interpret whether that means I went into Congo, or I'm very close, or I'm.
But they want that soundbite.
They want that soundbite.
Which I don't. I'm intentionally trying not to get that soundbite.
I can't give it to them.
I don't exactly, because it's just a very. Honestly, it's a very unethical way of really having a discussion. Instead of trying to understand the issue, you try to get the soundbite, so you get the clicks. And it's just a very disingenuous way of having those discussions.
Yes, that's so. Otherwise,
I like when they ask you, "Is there Rwandan troops in Congo?" I don't know. Like, you're the president. How do you not know? I was like, I don't know many things.
There are many things I don't know, including why somebody would be asking me that question when he knows the truth.
Exactly. But what is the solution? Like, for me, what always drives me to have these discussions is I always try to find solutions. I'm a bit naive because I simplify very complicated problems. But sometimes simplification helps you get some progress. So when you look at Congo, how can we solve it? Like, can it be solved?
It can be solved. Even if it wouldn't be solved in a perfect manner, but it can be solved at least to give everyone peace. Let me start with what it is now. Now, what is needed is for parties involved and others who want to support to stop the fighting, have a ceasefire. 2, it is to find a process that resolves political issues peacefully. And that will require the leaders of Congo to take the bull by its horns and accept the reality and say, I must talk to these Congolese opposed to me. I must listen to them and what are their grievances. even if they picked out of 10 grievances and they picked 6 and said, okay, on these ones we agree. On the other 4, we don't agree. That's progress. Now, 3, they must recognize the security concerns of Rwanda and address them because they are based in Congo, and in fact, they've been associated with the Congolese government. So there must be recognition of that. Now, the rest would come under that. Even if we got a minimum on the 3 or 4, ceasefire, political concerns addressed of the Congolese, I can come to the format later on, if that is. Then security concerns of Rwanda, they are not going to be negotiated.
So, but what is President? If you tell this to President Felix, what does he say? Like, he has no incentive to.
He keeps saying it publicly. He says he will never talk to these ones fighting him. He has to finish the problem militarily.
But why?
I can't be responsible for what is in his head or not there. I can't be responsible for that. I really don't know. I can only say what but even those countries that have interests in Congo, it's their right to have interests there. They should also find that their interests would be served better by solving these problems and in this manner.
What do you think of this potential solution? You're kind of taking it from Trump's playbook with Ukraine. So President Trump is like, hey, I'll protect you, Ukraine. I'll help you reach peace in a way that favors you to a certain level. But in return, I want access to your minerals. Couldn't the Congolese government do deals like this? Say, go to Europe, go to the US, say, we'll go to Rwanda, go to different countries that are involved in one way or another. Say, let's do a deal. M23 lays down their arms. We do a deal. We'll remove the FDLR from your border, and we'll do a business deal with the minerals in Eastern Congo. Okay. And then they go to the US, give us security guarantees with all these different militias and stuff. So they go, they stop fighting, and all these different private companies that are weaponizing them, get them out of the way, and you'll have rights to the mines in that territory. That seems like,
sounds interesting. Maybe it would address the problem. As long as one of those things you have mentioned is about somebody credibly guaranteeing that security concerns of Rwanda will be addressed and on a durable basis. The rest, that for me, I pick that one first, and then the rest is I'm open for discussion.
Yeah. And you've met many world leaders. You've met Putin. You've met Xi Jinping. Different US presidents.
I've ever met, yes, even President Trump.
Trump as well. I think it was in Davos.
In Davos.
Davos, yeah. Has that idea ever been discussed with any leader?
No.
Okay.
So please try and raise it with these leaders.
It could be interesting
I
to
was
discuss.
interested in pursuing it.
Yeah, I think the deal that's happening in Ukraine. And what is their take on for Xi Jinping, someone you've met on more than one occasions? What's his perspective on what's happening in Africa? I think we talk a lot about
there
the
are many
West.
Perspectives. I'm actually impressed by his perspectives. He's been engaged in Africa. He's been mainly economically. They don't get involved in the politics of countries except economic, which again, the benefits of that will depend on how the very countries are managed. If it is a country managed well and has deals with China, they benefit. If it is a country not managed well, I don't know what happens because when you've heard that some countries are heavily indebted and so on and so forth, well, I would ask the countries, where did you put the money? But otherwise, is anybody expecting China to go around throwing money at people? No.
But they're not too interested in peace. Have they tried? Have they? Is it Chinese efforts for reach peace?
They cannot. It can't be that they are not interested in peace when they are making such investments.
Okay, so they're interested. Okay.
Yeah.
But is it active efforts from China to try to reach peace in Congo, for example?
They have not been involved with matters of Congo.
It's too complicated.
Even for other countries, that have countries, have problems like where we are involved, like in Central African Republic or Mozambique. And I haven't heard of China suggesting that it should be resolved like this or like that. But they are busy doing business deals and with these governments.
When was the last time you spoke privately, if you can share, of course, to President Felix?
This must have been 2021.
Oh, wow. It's been a long time.
22? 22.
It's very long time.
22.
Oh, so you haven't spoken to him recently?
Yeah, actually, I think September 22.
Are you open to speak to him again?
I'm not opposed to speaking to him, but we have to be saying things that matter to the two countries and that are geared towards addressing the problems. I have no problem. But making deals with Tshisekedi is...
Making deals with what?
With Tshisekedi, with Felix?
It's very difficult.
It's the most difficult thing. The most... I am just challenging anybody. I want to see anybody who has made a deal with him and who would say, you are telling lies. I would want to see that. On the contrary, I have dealt with him. I know. You say you agree something, just as he steps out the door.
So it's an issue of leadership.
Out of the room. It's completely either forgotten, changed, or we will say, no, we didn't say that.
So it's an issue of leadership.
Yes.
Well, we've tackled a lot of topics. I think the story of how you've rebuilt a country from scratch or below scratch is, a perfect symbol of hope for other African countries. Now, I hope Congo, Sudan, other countries go down a similar path because I know the atrocities that are going on there. And I also hope the world starts to pay attention to what's happening in Africa. Similar things, if 10% of what's happening in Africa happens in some Asian countries are similar, but in Asia or Europe or the US or Latin America, it'll be all over the news. Literally, your team told me yesterday there's dead bodies being burnt and eaten in Congo on a regular basis. I didn't know these things still exist. I thought those were ended 10, 20, 30 years ago.
They happen.
It's heartbreaking. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate being as open as you have been. And I hope, if we meet again, it'll be under different circumstances. And I hope that, even though that hope looks slim, that we see peace in Congo and long-lasting peace.
We really want peace. We want peace in Congo because it translates into peace for us. And so that we continue rebuilding our small country and that has had enough of suffering, more than enough. We can't be the ones who are looking for any trouble to take us back to those days.
If you were sitting, last question I want to end it with, if you were sitting privately with President Felix right now, what would you tell him?
I would tell him I wish he wasn't president of that good country.
Okay. For Mr. President, I really appreciate it.
Actually, I'm likely to, when next time I meet him, I will tell him that.
That person.
I promise, in person, directly.
I hope he changes. Like, if what you're saying is true, I hope he changes. I hope he becomes a bit more diplomatic.
It's terrible.
It's better for his country. It's better for him. It's better for, peace is better for him. Remember the president, Francis Kabila was shot by his bodyguard. Like, war is not good for anybody.
The father was called Roland Kabila, Laurent. And then the father is, the son is Joseph.
Joseph, yeah. Laurent Kabila is the one that was shot.
Is the father.
That was Francis, my bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So war is bad for everybody. So, I hope either Felix...
I don't know whether you have seen this about Felix. Somebody, an Italian family person who